Throughout history, sexism has been prevalent in many aspects of society. But even in modern times, the slowest changes have been in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, commonly known as STEM. In history, many women's achievements were pushed to the side because men didn't want to give them credit, they wanted to take credit for themselves, or they were just ignored. An example of this is Liza Meitner, a physicist who worked during the time when Germany was occupied by Nazis. Early in her career, Liza Meitner discovered radiationless transition, but credit wasn't given to her for this discovery because 2 years later, a French scientist named Pierre-Victor Auger discovered it for himself. And later in her career, Meitner helped to discover nuclear fission alongside her partner Otto Hahn. At the time, they both agreed to leave her name off of the paper so the Nazis could not use the paper to persecute her. But after the war, Hahn maintained the fiction that Liza Meitner had nothing to do with the discovery, whether he wanted more credit for himself or he just forgot the pivotal role that Meitner played. He diminished her role to that of a junior assistant. In 1945, Hahn alone was awarded the Nobel Prize in Chemistry. Thankfully, later, Meitner and the rest of the partners on the project were awarded credit when they were given the U.S. Fermi Prize. In the end, Meitner was also given one of the greatest awards a scientist can achieve. She had an element named after her. Another example is Grace Hopper. Grace Hopper was a mathematician and computer scientist during World War II. She worked on some of the earliest computers known to man, the Mark I and Mark II computers. After her Navy training, she went to Harvard to work on these, and eventually she became the sole operator of the Mark I computer, a huge achievement. But after the war ended, the university decided not to keep her on as a scientist. They kept her on for a small amount of time as a secretary and a tour guide to the facilities that she once ran. But while all the rest of her male colleagues were promoted into permanent positions, she was fired. And in modern times, the problem is almost as bad. For example, only 35% of all STEM bachelor degrees go to women. And for master degrees and PhDs, only 32% in STEM go to women. In computer science and computer engineering, only about 19% of the degrees go to women. And in the workforce, once they go into STEM careers, it's also bad. Once a woman enters a tech field, they're 45% more likely to leave than a man is. In a recent year, over 80,000 complaints of gender discrimination were filed. 84% of women said that they were told that they were too aggressive in their career. 90% saw some form of sexist behavior. 75% of women have been asked some question about family, children, marriage, or home life, questions men rarely, if ever, have to answer. And overall, women are paid only 80% of their male counterparts. So why is it that this gender disparity is so huge in modern society? One of the reasons is negative media. One example of this negative media is from Mattel. Mattel created Computer Engineer Barbie to help show girls that STEM was an attainable field for them. And while this may sound positive, in reality, it had negative effects. They wrote a book to go alongside the doll that they created. And in the book, one of Barbie's friends walked up and asked when they were going to be able to play the game she was creating. Barbie responded, "I'm only creating the design ideas. I'll need Steven and Brian's help to turn it into a real game." This idea that even role models can't achieve their dreams without the help of without male help, it shows young girls that if their role models can't do it, they can't do it. And this idea beats girls down. We start to think that we can't succeed in these. And there's also the problem of lack of media. When there's little to no attention of women's achievements, people don't know that women can go into STEM. For example, when you Google famous mathematicians, this is what shows up. There's one, maybe two women on this entire page. And while you can name at least two of the male scientists on there, like Albert Einstein or Isaac Newton, you can name none of the female scientists. The woman right in the middle right there, that's Sophie Germain, and she played a huge role in mathematics. And then there's Hypatia, who isn't even pictured here, who helped lay the foundation for modern mathematics. and Katherine Johnson, who computed by hand the numbers for NASA. So why is it that we just tend to ignore women? A huge reason is unintentional bias. Let me check. There we go. Oh shoot, I forgot.
Unconscious bias happens under the surface, and we don't even know that it's happening. And unfortunately, unconscious biases can cause us to treat people unfairly. But should this even happen? After all, the world is filled with people who believe in fairness and in giving everyone an equal chance. And I'll bet that you're one of them. Unconscious bias happens automatically, even to fair-minded people who want to do the right thing. Each day we make thousands of decisions, and our brains rely on unconscious bias, much like a shortcut that allows us to make quick judgments based on our background and our past experiences. That means that sometimes when we don't have all the information, our brains will try to automatically fill in the blanks. Since it just happens without our even realizing it, this phenomenon is sometimes referred to as unintentional bias. And sad to say, it can lead us into premature judgments towards just about any group or individual, though biases tend to be exhibited towards minority groups based on gender, race, class, age, weight, and that kind of thing. The result? Well, unfortunately, whether bias is conscious or unconscious, intentional or unintentional, it can result in some prejudicial thoughts and behaviors, basically in treating people unfairly.
So unconscious biases basically make you take past experiences or ideas that have been forced their way into your brain and make them change the way you act when something is happening right in front of you. And a huge way this happens is with stereotypes. For example, the typical stereotype of a woman is that they're not as good at math and that they're more focused on the arts or languages rather than analytical things. And this often makes people think that they can't be good at analytical things, like STEM. So women are expected to fill these things called communal roles, which are caring, helpful, and gentle roles. And STEM is more agentic, which means it's strong, competitive, and forceful, things women aren't typically considered to be. So when a woman shows agentic qualities, they're less likely to be accepted because they don't do what's expected of them. And when a woman doesn't do what's assumed of them, such as be bad at STEM, they're also not as likely to fit in. And it also leads to gender roles, like the idea that women are supposed to stay home and take care of the children. Because of this, women think they have to do that sometimes, and STEM is often thought to be a time-consuming job, so they don't think they can take part in it if they're to have a family. And also in younger children, the idea that STEM is unattainable starts with this thing called the gift mindset. The gift mindset is the idea that whatever ability you have at birth is the ability that you will have forever. It's pre-decided. This idea makes you believe you can't grow, and because of this, many women think that because they're bad at STEM right now, they can never be good at STEM subjects. And then there are the common excuses that people use, like Mark Zuckerberg. When he was asked why his board had no women on it, he responded, "I'm going to find people who are helpful, and I don't particularly care what gender they are." While this sounds positive, like he doesn't see gender, when paired with the fact that he hasn't hired women, it shows that he doesn't think women are helpful and he doesn't think they're that smart. And ideas like this from a role model, somebody who is so prominent in the STEM community, bleeds down into people, and they start thinking it's okay to think this and it's okay to say this. And it causes an even greater idea that women can't go into STEM. So it's obvious that this is a problem in our society, but how is it a problem? How does gender diversity help companies that achieve it, and how does a lack of it harm companies? One major way is in the economy. It has been proven that the more gender diversity a company has, the more likely they are to better perform financially. In fact, a company in the top quartile in gender diversity is 15% more likely to have larger financial returns as compared to every single other company in the other three quartiles. And another way is in the workplace. When a woman feels comfortable in the workplace, when they feel like they're not the only one, when they feel like they're part of the group, it helps to improve the dynamic. Having people of different backgrounds also helps bring new ideas and perspectives to the table. And having different ideas and perspectives and different backgrounds at a workplace helps to develop deeper level understandings. Because you're not just looking at surface characteristics like gender or hair color or height or trivial things like that. You're looking at who the person is. And when you look at who the person is, you understand them better and it creates better relationships. So how can we fight this disparity? How are companies doing it right now? One of the ways is unconscious bias training. Basically, what unconscious bias training does is first they identify what unconscious bias is, which is the idea that what you're doing right now may be influenced by past experiences. And then they let people know that everyone has unconscious biases and that it's okay to have them because that's the way our brains work. But what they let you know is that it's not okay to act on them. They teach you that you have to think, is this really about the person in front of me, or is this about some past negative experience? And through fighting these prejudicial ideas at the root, we can eliminate all gender disparity. And starting in schools, we can also eliminate this. Make people believe that STEM is even attainable. One way to do this is the growth mindset. The growth mindset is the idea that the more you repeat a task, the more you learn about a task, the better you will be at that task. In a study, mathematics students were given an intervention seminar to help increase their mathematics skills. The control group was simply given tips and tricks about how to improve. But the second group was given those tips and tricks, plus a presentation about how the brain forms neurological connections and how studying will lead to improved results. The group that was shown how the brain works, their grades rapidly rose, showing that STEM is really just about studying and anybody can be successful in it. Another huge thing is role models. One of the earliest STEM female role models is Dana Scully. She was an FBI agent and a doctor on the popular sci-fi show, The X-Files. Women who watched The X-Files were 50% more likely to go into STEM careers. And 63% of women felt that Dana Scully helped to increase the importance of STEM in their lives. The simple appearance of one woman being successful in STEM and in a career that is typically dominated by men helped so many people believe that they could do it too.
Many of us have said that the character Dana Scully inspired us to go into a STEM career because Scully demonstrated that it was possible to be a scientist and an awesome one at that. So this phenomenon is known as the Scully effect.
I became passionate about how women are portrayed on screen when my daughter was 2, and I realized that far more of the characters in shows and movies made for kids were male than female. It was a huge imbalance, which I totally didn't expect, because my theory is that we're training kids from the very beginning to have unconscious gender bias by showing less female characters who do less.
One of the most important things that we can do is increase representation of women in the sciences in the media that's being consumed. Having women represented as competent and diverse STEM career women, showing a full life of a scientist as opposed to just kind of having a marginal character that happens to be female in the background.
There's nothing more fun than being immersed in a story, whether it's a TV series or a movie or whatever, that you see yourself in a character and you get to see them live their lives, whether it's the life you want or that you wish you had or that you do have. You get to see yourself in that character, and that's super powerful. That elevates it. In terms of what the future looks like, I think...
So there are other role models in more modern media too. For example, Shuri from the Marvel Universe. She is the smartest person in the Marvel Universe, and she not only shows young girls that they can go into STEM, she shows that the stereotype of STEM being a bland, boring subject is untrue. In the movies, she's surrounded by colorful, amazing, interesting technology, and it shows that STEM is just that it is interesting and beautiful. And then there's Miss Frizzle. Who didn't grow up reading Miss Frizzle? She teaches you that learning can be fun, that science can be fun, because the way her books are set up, not only are they informational, they're also highly entertaining. And there are also role models in real life, like Sally Ride, the astronaut and physicist we all know, and Margaret Hamilton, a computer scientist who helped to develop the software for NASA's Apollo missions. She became the director of software engineering at MIT, and that stack of papers she's standing next to, that is the code from the NASA Apollo missions. It's as tall as her. And when I talked to Ioana Dimitrioff, a scientist and group leader at Genentech, she stressed to me the importance of role models, not only as people to look up to and to give you a glimpse into STEM, but also as people who can support you and give you advice. As she said, there is politics and BS everywhere, and you need to have people who can tell you that they've been through that and that they made it. And all of these techniques alone are highly effective, but when combined, we can completely destroy the gender disparity and create a field that is equal opportunity, where everyone believes they can go into it, and more importantly, people will start to want to go into it. And my 2-year plan is I applied to a lot of 4-year colleges, and I will hopefully be attending UCLA or UC Berkeley. Those are my top 2 choices for either mathematics, obviously, or international relations. Thank you. Should I have a question? Yeah?
I'm just curious what TV character, or if there's a TV character that was especially inspiring to you.
Well, like, as I said, the Miss Frizzle books, I always loved reading those, and they just kind of showed me that it can be fun, so stuff like that. And then also, like, watching Marvel, when I found out that, like, the Marvel Universe, the directors of the Marvel Universe have said, like, Shuri is the smartest person in the entire universe. When I found that out, I was so excited, and I was just, like, smiling so big, because it's just cool to have people like that you can see. Any other questions? Can I go? Yeah.
Claire, what made you decide to do this topic?
Well, I want to go into mathematics in college and hopefully for the rest of my life. And it's always been really interesting to me. Like, I've been lucky enough that I grew up here where I do have female role models, and I have, like, Mr. Sindel, for example, who always stresses the importance of women in STEM. And calling you out here. So I'm lucky enough to grow into that, but it's always been interesting to me to see what it's like once I'm outside of this amazing opportunity place where that it shows me that I can do it. Like, what will happen once I get into college? What will happen once I go into my career? And I just kind of wanted to see what that was. Come on.
Go ahead, I have a question.
Yeah.
You said you wanted to do mathematics. What was the second thing you said you wanted to do?
Or international relations. And those two can also be combined in some really cool ways.
Awesome. Thank you, Claire.
All right.